are back, and I'm Caden Sidebottom, joined by Danny Wiegans. And Danny, now that the draft is over, we just get to talk about it more.
Oh yeah, you can never talk about the draft enough, especially in the off season.
Yeah. So all the lead up, all the build up, favorite part of the year, checking out scouting, summer scouting, all that stuff comes to 3 days, amounts to a weekend, and it's over just like that. And now we get to look back and see where the puzzle pieces fell into place with every team, and we're going to do that starting today with the NFC. And I want to start with the NFC East, who I think, as an entire division, and I'll let you speak on this as well. As an entire division, I felt had one of the better drafts compared to the other divisions. Just as a whole, drafted really well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know that any of them. I mean, so we kind of talked about Eagles, Commanders before. Like I think they had great drafts. Giants had a good draft. Cowboys had a decent draft. I think this is one of the divisions where they really shined. And as much as you can say that, as we're talking 2 3 days after the
Right.
draft is concluded, not at the end of next year where we actually know what happened. But I mean, as far as it seems, this definitely looks like one of the divisions that came out better off after the
Absolutely.
draft.
And I'll start with that team you mentioned last there, the Dallas Cowboys, who I agree probably had um, the weakest out of these four in terms of their draft. But Tyler Guyton in the first after a trade down, um, felt like that was a fine pick. It did seem like they were going to go offensive line with Tyron Smith out, kind of deciding what they want to do with Tyler Smith, whether bounce him to guard or keep him at guard or bounce him back out to tackle. With the Guyton selection, it does look like they're going to keep him at guard and let Guyton play tackle. But he's a guy who's big and strong and developmental, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I know a lot of people debated whether he was going to be a first-round talent or not, but the way these tackles kind of flew off the board, it's hard to argue taking him in the first.
Yeah, I mean, I like their draft overall. I mean, I think kind of like you said, Tyler Guyton at 29. I mean, we projected him in that range, so I don't think that's a reach. I don't think that's a value. It's kind of about where we thought he would go. Obviously, Marshawn Nealand is kind of that pinpoint that I think will really show how this
Yep.
draft class does. If he does well, I think it's a good draft class. If he doesn't, I think you're bordering on a average to below average draft class. He's got some hype, especially after Senior Bowl. He started to pick up steam, so if he turns out well, it should be good. And then obviously grabbing BB in the third. I mean that feels like a good value. Definitely was I saw most of the time getting drafted in the second in most mocks. So to get him in that third feels really good. And then you've got lower depth guys like
Lafau, yeah.
Lafau, who's a decent linebacker
I
in
felt
the
like it
in
might
the
have been a
third.
little early
Uh,
for him in the third.
Yeah, I think it was, but I think knowing that their next pick was the fifth
Yeah,
round, I think they knew he wouldn't be
yeah.
there by then. And then Kalen Carson. I think Kalen Carson's a decent depth corner, special teamer. I think he'll help out on that end. And then you got your other guys that may or may not have an
The,
impact.
the,
Probably
the
won't.
one that's kind of
But
interesting to me is Ryan Flournoy from Southeast Missouri State, who got
okay,
some hype as he's very old as a prospect, but got some hype through the
yeah,
draft process as this guy that maybe you take a swing on. Um, I think I forget what it was. It was some type of award that he won at Southeast Missouri State that kind of put him on radar, and then his athletic testing went really smoothly as well. But taking a shot on him, they just released Michael Gallup, right? Am I wrong in saying that? Yeah. So I mean,
yep.
that's a guy who might end up getting a shot. Like you said, I thought Carson was good value. Um, I really liked BB. I think I liked him maybe a little bit more than you did on our pre-draft episode. Um, so I thought that was great in the third. But Nealand, yeah, some action for the Cowboys. That's going to be the main issue with him. He's big, he's strong, uh, a little bit of developing left to do. But they're aging on the edge. With DeMarcus Lawrence getting a little bit older, Micah Parsons obviously is going to get his bag, but Nealand comes in as a guy who you hope Lawrence can teach him some things, and that MAC competition holds up at the NFL level.
Yeah, for sure. Like we said, I think it's a
Yeah,
decent draft. I don't think they did anything crazy. I think they did what we expected them to do. They took guys where they had to and where they wanted to, and really came out, nothing bigger.
I was
All
gonna
in is
say.
looking like a
Yeah, I was gonna
complete
say this is
lie.
not an all-in
Um,
draft at all.
yeah, this is definitely not an all-in draft by any
But
means.
we can keep
But
it moving to. Let's go with one of the media's favorites, and the Philadelphia Eagles.
oh yeah.
And I'll let you start there.
Oh, I get to start. All right. So obviously, I think this was. I can't remember if you did too. Q was my favorite corner, so getting him at 22 is crazy. To me, that's a top 15 guy in any other draft at the very least. His speed, I think his only knock is Toledo, and I think at the Senior Bowl he kind of quieted down those concerns. And then just the heartbreaking pick of the entire draft for me was Cooper DeJean, 2 picks before my Texans. That is insane. To have their team, their biggest need was corner. They're aging. Slay's really old. The backups to Slay are not that great. They don't have great depth. Their safeties are okay. And so when you add in Cooper and Quinion, that just kind of gives you that diversity that you need. If you need to run 3 wide, you can run those 3: Darius Slay, Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. If you need DeJean to drop back in a safety role, if injuries come out, that's where I love DeJean. I don't know why he slid. I am still waiting for something to
Yeah.
come out for that. But the flexibility he gives you there, where even if you're starting him at corner, and then one of your safeties goes down, and your backup cornerback's better at cornerback than your backup safety is at safety, just move Cooper to safety, move that backup. Like, it gives you so much versatility you can use with this kid, and just to do that, I don't understand why he dropped so far. Jalix Hunt, I heard a lot about him before the draft. I think it was Mike Clay was his.
Mike Clay.
It's one of the big guy sleepers was Jalix Hunt. Like, he was all in love with him. And so I figured he would go somewhere, seeing him go to the Eagles, and kind of interested, see that Hassan replacement.
Sure.
Maybe we'll see.
Kind of in the same mold a little bit.
Yeah, and then just some fun picks like Trotter. Yeah, I told you it looks like a terrible take now, but Jeremiah Trotter Jr. He was my number 1 linebacker. I liked him over Peyton Wilson, and I love Peyton Wilson, but I like Jeremiah Trotter better. He looked better. He looked smoother. His tape looked way better. And so to continue that legacy with his dad being an Eagle as well, that's a fun pick in the 5th round. Nia Smith, a good special teamer. He'll be a punt returner. That'll be fun to watch. And then a great one that I'm sure you love, Johnny Wilson. The giant wide receiver that was told to switch to tight end and refused. He is with the Eagles, and as much as this is dreamland, yeah, A.J. Brown. I want him to learn from A.J. Brown how to be a big-bodied, bully receiver.
Yeah, the red zone packages they're going to be able to put together with Johnny Wilson. I think anybody would be able to do that. But, I mean, Wilson just 6'7" on the outside, giving you a target at the pylon. I think that's where he'll find some serious success. I don't know how much. I think they're drafting him to be – they almost have to be drafting him to be a receiver because I don't know how much he gives you on special teams. Being that big, I don't think he really gives you anything. Maybe coming off the edge for field goal block. That'd be sweet. I don't think he's quick enough for it. But the red zone packages they're going to be able to build with Wilson Brown and Devontae Smith, with Dallas Goedert, they're going to be really fun to watch. I think that, people kind of, they give Howie Roseman some shit because they're like, oh, he always has one of the best drafts because he follows Daniel Jeremiah's big board. That's just what he does all the time, which is kind of funny. And apparently he was calling people, or he was calling, sent a text to Jeremiah. I think it was about Jalix Hunt, saying like, take him off your top 100 so nobody takes him. I don't know what that was about. But Quinion and Cooper, Quinion kind of the victim of a very offensive-heavy first round. The fact that he got to 22, they are reportedly trying to trade up to try and get him. That they didn't have to. They could stick and pick Quinion. I think they're definitely taking a bet on the athleticism. He would played a lot of kind of this shaded zone defense. When I think the Eagles, I think a lot more about press man, being able to stay step for step with your guys as the pass rush gets home. So at the Senior Bowl, going step for step, staying on the hip of Roman Wilson, Quinion proved maybe that he could do it. But I think it's going to be a little bit of a schematic shock for him. DeJean getting to 40, you already talked about, what you feel about that. I feel largely the same way. Uh, I would be really interested to see Cooper DeJean in the slot for this team. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's back. He didn't look as good for the Lions last year. I think DeJean may threaten that spot, and if he gets in the nickel, I think he could be an even more fun player than we already think about him. And then you've already hit on what's left. I think Will Shipley is interesting as a pass-catching back coming out of Clemson. Trotter following his dad's always a cool story. I mean, every name, that sounds like I'm paying attention to Daniel Jeremiah's big board. I really liked every pick they made. Dylan McMahon, even with their last pick at 190, as kind of this heavy-handed guard that'll be able to get in with the offensive line factory that is in Philadelphia, and he'll probably end up being a good player.
Yeah.
The Eagles also, fun fact, broke the draft record for most trades in a single draft. Howie Roseman, he did it again. I guess that's just what he does.
I mean, this was the draft of
it really
records.
Was.
I mean, everything. Yeah, I think I would consider them a good draft. I think that is a pretty good draft, if not a very good draft. The only little confusing thing is, this is nitpicking really, is Will Shipley. I like him. You just traded for Saquon, and I get it. He's injury prone, or he's labeled injury prone, but at the same time, Will Shipley is a very different back than Saquon to me. If you're looking for the compliment maybe, but are you really going to pay Saquon that much to only have him out there for 2 downs when he's a 3-down back?
I don't.
It's a little confusing for me.
I don't think it necessarily hinders anything with Saquon. I think they are certainly taking him as a change of pace type guy, and I'm blanking on Sirianni. There he is. Sirianni had experience with like a Nyheim Hines type player in Indy, so maybe they're hoping that's what Shipley can be, is this pass catcher kind of dynamic back, and that's what he offers them. So I think, overall,
Fair.
Solid draft, and I think we can move on to their divisional rival in the New York Giants, who only had 6 picks, but between them and a team we're going to talk about in a little bit, the Saints, I don't know. It's hard to find a team that did more with less in this draft than the New York Giants did.
I love.
I think their 6 picks were great, and it starts with Malik Neighbors. Schefter reported, I say in hand quotes, that they were Alt was number 1 on their board, and then he went to the Chargers. So they kind of just had to take Malik Neighbors, which is ridiculous. You get to take Malik Neighbors.
What a crazy statement.
Malik Neighbors, who I think, obviously, not betting on Daniel Jones. I think they are effectively pretty much done with Daniel Jones. I think they're looking at the offseason next year to get the quarterback situation figured out. But if Jones is going to show you anything, it's going to be with a player like Malik Neighbors, who now they're starting to build this team out for the future, it feels like. It does feel like they're back on the right track. The subsequent picks went along with that. Newbin, safety out of Minnesota, felt not entirely early for me. I didn't know when the safeties really were going to start flying off the board in this draft, but he was taken as safety 1 at 47. Andrew Phillips was a guy that I saw at the Combine, a guy that you watched, obviously, watching UK football this year. Projects to be a slot corner, but I like him. I like what he put on tape. I like the upside that he gives you. Theo Johnson, I know one of your draft crushes at Penn State, blew away the RAS score. Just a big body guy, kind of in the same mold as Darren Waller, who seems to effectively be retiring. Obviously, everything mental and emotional for Waller. Hope that is all well. But he retires, and Theo Johnson, again, kind of in the build of a Darren Waller, so hoping to get him in the offense. I love Tyrone Tracy. We talked about him in the running back episode. Out of Purdue, former receiver, converted to running back. I just think gives you a lot of dynamism in the backfield. Really fun player. And Darius Masau was not a guy that I was able to watch. Watching UCLA primarily was for like Latu and the other edge rushers there. So didn't pay much attention to Masao. Can't say much on him, but I have a friend who's a big UCLA fan who loved Masao. So he's also a Giants fan, UCLA and a Giants fan. So he loved the pick. But what are your thoughts on this draft?
Yeah, I mean, you can't. I agree with you. I think this is one of those drafts where I don't know that you can find many that did better with less. I mean, obviously, I love Malik Neighbors. Tyler Nubin, I like you said. My only concern was he may have been taken a little too early. I don't even know that he was wide receiver one on. From what it sounds like, it didn't sound like he was even safety one on many of the other teams. So I think they probably could have waited, but it is what it is. Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do to get your guy. And then Andrew Phillips I liked. He tested horribly at the combine, really. Pretty slow, but that's not too big a deal. But he was making some big drops in the drills. And then Theo Johnson, obviously love him, athletic freak. I'm excited he got somewhere that might actually have somewhere for him if Waller really doesn't come back. And then Tyron Tracy, Darius Musa. I do like Darius. He was one of those guys that I had watched enough film to know who he was, but not enough to give him a grade or anything. And I liked what I saw. I didn't delve too deep, like I said, but I liked what I saw. So, I mean, it's a good pick for me. I mean, I think they need that extra little bit of help there. But definitely it's hard with this draft class because it is so small, but at least they made it effective in filling the holes like an Xavier McKinney. They needed a real wide receiver one. They needed some cornerback help. So, I mean, they filled the holes that they had to with the things that they could. So, not bad.
Absolutely. And we can move on to probably, in terms of the top 5 picks, probably my favorite draft in this division in the Washington Commanders.
I think preliminary, haven't done a full dive. I think this is the best draft class.
Yeah, I mean,
this year.
It's up there. I haven't either. I haven't done my draft class rankings yet.
I'm not ready to say it for sure, but I mean, if they're not number one, they're like two.
In terms of the top 5, it's hard to argue it. And we had talked about how we felt on Jaden Daniels. We both had Drake May rated higher, but in terms of objectively looking at a draft class, taking a quarterback high is not necessarily a bad thing, especially in the top 2. So you bring in Daniels to be the new franchise quarterback. Johnny Newton falls in your lap, who I expected to be a first-rounder. Sounds like the Lisfranc injury that he had in his foot may have contributed to him falling a little bit. I did not expect him to be the 3rd interior defensive lineman off the board.
That was very surprising.
He falls into the lap. Not a guy that they necessarily need. You talked about them potentially moving off of Jonathan Allen, so maybe planning in the future for that. But at pick 50, they got one of my favorite players in the entire draft in Michigan's Mike Sanders still. You know how I feel about the nickel corner. It's my favorite position in football. And Sanders still, tape-wise, everything you hear coming out of Michigan-wise, Jim Harbaugh, stamp of approval player, captain on that defense. I mean, he just seems like the perfect nickel corner prospect.
Yeah, I 100% agree. This was one of those picks that made me. We had kind of talked about it, and we will more when we do the AFC. This is why I wasn't happy with our Lassiter pick. A few picks later, and you got a team captain that's who we thrive on, is drafting team captains. So I think 22 or past 25 picks have been team captains. We love the team captain pick. This is a guy, captain pick. We need a nickel corner. He is a nickel corner. He fits in so well. And yeah, sure, you don't want to take him where we were, but then trade back a couple spots, pick up something. Do something other than just it felt like a panic pick. But not to talk too much about the Texans. We're not talking about them. But I like Mike Sanders still. He was one of my cornerbacks that if he weren't a nickel, he would have been higher in my quarterback rankings. Just because obviously you take some off because
positional value wise, and he's a little undersized, so you're not expecting him to play outside. But
exactly, yeah,
so fun in the nickel. He's gonna be. I think he's gonna be a really good pro. Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State. We called him Brock Bowers light when we did the tight end episode. Just this kind of this athletic freak. uh, hurdling linebackers at Kansas State. Should be a fun fit. He could be a guy that you get in your offense. You can kind of move him around, do a bunch of stuff. He'll play fullback. He'll play tight end. He'll play H back. He'll do all these different things. I think he's a fun player. Brandon Coleman out of TCU. I know you liked. You talked about him in the interior offensive line episode. Uh, I'll let you talk more about him. Say whatever you want to say about Brandon Coleman. You got the mic.
He's just good. He's another. A lot of these interior guys I love because of their versatility. But especially for him at the Commanders, they just released Charles Leno. They have a 32-year-old Lucas. He's the starter currently at left tackle. So I mean, this line has so many opportunities for this guy to start. But his testing was good. He's quick. He's got a smooth offset. Long arms. I mean, he's exactly what you want out of a tackle. He's just not that premier guy, but he's going to do great for them at whatever position they need him. This is another one of those guys, 6'6", 320, long arms. I think he can play you anywhere position between left tackle and right tackle. Wherever you need, he's a great guy. TCU had a strong feeling on him, and for him to go 90, I was surprised. I thought he would go a little earlier in like mid-second, but man, they snuck him in there, and I couldn't be happier for him.
And part of the reason maybe why this draft class is being objectively viewed as so good is because they had 6 picks in the top 100. And when you get that benefit, it's almost hard to mess it up in terms of draft pundits after the draft, looking back on it and go, oh, Ben Sinnott, oh, Brandon Coleman, nice. And that was their 5th pick. Wow. But it was at pick 67 that they took Brandon Coleman. And then at pick 100, scratched my head a little bit at Luke McCaffrey. I think I know you love it. Not that Luke McCaffrey as a player. Pick 100 felt a little early. The back of the 3rd round, I did not think he was going to end up reaching the 3rd round.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do, I think he probably would have fallen further. I think this is another case of the same thing as last time. I think they knew they wanted Luke. I think that wide receiver room is in more of turmoil than people realize. They're dissatisfied with Diami Brown. I think after this season, they're becoming dissatisfied with Jahan Dotson. I think Terry's good, but I don't think he's that wide receiver one that most teams covet. And so they're really looking for an answer. And I think, obviously, they weren't targeting for a wide receiver one in this one, but I think they are looking for a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, and I think Luke fits that role really well for them. I think he's going to really be a friend to Jaden Daniels, similarly as Tank Dell was, just in the sense of Luke knows what a quarterback needs because he was one. He knows what a quarterback sees. He knows what a quarterback wants. He knows what is going to help his quarterback. And with having a rookie quarterback, you need wide receivers like that. And so I think maybe they could have waited on him a little bit, absolutely. But I think they saw him and they said, hey, we need this kid. This kid's going to help Jaden. He's going to be the reason Jaden succeeds, or he's going to be one of them. We need to set this team up for him. And I think they saw that and they're like, you know what, our next pick is until the 5th round. Let's not risk it. Let's get this kid. Let's help Jaden as much as we can. And I think really just off of the McCaffrey name, there's some hope. But even just what he's put on tape, he's a pretty crafty receiver, and I'll be.
It's in the bloodline for sure, and he's going to be another piece for that offensive coaching unit. I've been fooled by Cliff Kingsbury before. I won't do it again. I'm not going to go in expecting huge things from this offense, but there are a lot of pieces and a lot of tools for him to play with. Jaden is certainly in a very good situation. But he's not in as good of a situation as Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears as we move to the NFC North. The Bears, obviously, you could say they won the draft because they had Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze.
I think you could say that for sure.
You definitely could.
I may be on the different end of this than
well,
you.
I'm not. So I'm not on a. I'm not on a. They definitely did. But Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze objectively is a ridiculous draft class.
Yes, that's not what I'm saying. I agree with that. So where my criticism comes is for these guys, I ignore Caleb, I ignore Rome. Because if they didn't pick Caleb, if they didn't pick Rome, that was a mistake. Those like those are great picks objectively, sure, but that is what you had to pick. Like that wasn't they decided well or they made no, like they just didn't fuck it up, which congrats to them. That gives them a little bit, but I kind of just ignore that. My problem comes with Kieran.
Really?
Yeah, and I like Kieran. I really do, but he's a project that needs a good O-line coach, and I don't think the Bears have that. I'm worried for him going to the Bears because he is a project. He's not gonna start and be this elite tackle or anything like that. Obviously, he went into third. He's a guy that you need to get with a good O-line coach. Give him some good tactics. He's a moldable prospect, a very moldable, very high potential prospect, but he still needs that molding. I'm just worried that the Bears don't have what it takes to get him there. And Torrey Taylor, taking a punter in the fourth is, when you only have 5 picks, taking a punter in the fourth is an interesting choice.
Brett Coleman tweeted right after they took Odunze. He was like, Williams, Odunze, light the rest of the picks on fire. I don't care. We're done here. And then when they took Torrey Taylor, he tweeted again and said, I guess they listened. Like they lit him on fire. Taylor was he is the most experienced punter out of college ever, which is kind of a fun fact because he played for Iowa for so many years. He's a great punter. He's not. You don't take a punter in the 4th round. Yeah. It was. Now they traded back in. That would have been the last pick of their draft, and they traded back in for Austin Booker, who I think is a player worth taking a swing on, coming back up for like 6'5", 6'6", tested athletically very well, coming out of Kansas. The tape is good, so you hope that you pull some more out of him, opposite Montez Sweat. But yeah, I'm with you. Kieran and Torrey Taylor, it does feel like, obviously Taylor. It's like, can you even evaluate that pick? Like it's like why'd they do that? Like why didn't they do that? Like they could have done it, so who cares? It's like I genuinely don't know how to feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're already like that's the thing. So that's what I was getting. I like Austin Booker. I like that in the 5th round. That's a great pick. That's what salages this draft class for me is Austin Booker in the 5th because that wax silver that looks good. But the Kieran pick's confusing. The Torrey pick's confusing, and then the whole idea of, hey, we're gonna take our last pick, draft Torrey Taylor, a punter. Oh shoot, we want Austin Booker. Let's trade back. No, like what? Yeah. Draft Austin Booker, and then if you really want Torrey Taylor, he's gonna fall to the 5th. It just didn't make sense to me at all. So I like Austin Booker. I like Kieran. I'm worried for him. Their first 2 picks, obviously phenomenal. It is what it is. It's just going to be an interesting draft class because I feel like this is very much the Bears will fuck up anything they have. And I feel like this is it. Yeah,
it does feel like if Caleb was going to go anywhere and flop, Chicago would probably be that place. I'm not as worried about. I know you feel the same. I'm not as worried about Rome Odunze flopping. I think that guy's just going to be a terrific pro right out of the gate, and now he gets to learn behind a guy that I comped him to in Keenan Allen. It's the best situation for both of them. I think people are immediately taking the Bears as playoff contenders right away, and I think the rest of the division is tough, and it got better. And we could talk about Minnesota, another team who got better in this draft. Pat traded up to 10, and we talked about, we thought that maybe this could happen. J.J. McCarthy not getting in that top 5. We talked about the bet. That was J.J. McCarthy not going in the top 5 for plus money. Talked about it all week. Both made some money off of that. We felt pretty strongly that it wasn't going to happen, and they were able to land him at 10, which I think if you were, especially with this run on quarterbacks that we didn't see coming, McCarthy at 10 you can be happy with. In there with Kevin O'Connell, I think that McCarthy's in a really nice spot to succeed.
Yeah, I agree. I keep hearing, and it's funny, I keep hearing, obviously, the Vikings was the best position for a quarterback to take, and I disagree. I think the Bears should get that credit, because I get people are saying, oh, well, Of course, Bears have whatever, but Bears have put together a really good
Mm-hmm.
team to walk into. I mean, without this draft, they had two stud receivers. They have a very good tight end. They've got a decent to good offensive line and a defense that was playing top 10 level at the
It
end of the
almost
year
it
last
sounds
year.
like you're talking about the Vikings. It really does.
But that But that's my difference is the only difference I say is it's kind of flip flop with their offensive line and their
Yeah,
defense. I think the Vikings' offensive line is probably top 10,
the defense
and their
is
defense is
decent. Yeah,
average to good. Which I think, more importantly for me at least, I think it's more important to have a very good defense than a average to
sure.
good offensive line. But anyway, I think they're both great situations. It's just interesting hearing people just so definitively say, "Oh, it's the Vikings. Oh, it's the Vikings." When Jaron Hall, the Pastronaut, like they all
Sure.
failed. So if it's so good, why did those two fail? If we're saying that anyone could, just an interesting thought of mine. But to get to their draft class, I liked it. I don't think it was anything outstanding. I think JJ McCarthy at 10 is great for them. Made some money
Yep.
off that. That was nice. That was a solid look. Also made some money off of the top 5 order.
Yeah.
That was phenomenal. But yeah, JJ good. Dallas at 17 feels
Yeah,
like a steal.
traded
I
back up
think
from 23, a guy in the
yeah.
Brian Flores defense that's going to be able to pin his ears back, which was always how he's going to win at the NFL level. Um, and they get to drop him into coverage, which we talked about him being the best in this class at. So yeah, Turner was great.
Yeah, I think he's the fit that
Yeah.
just works here. And then it sucks not to have a second or third, but I think obviously they did that to get
Hmm.
Dallas Turner and JJ McCarthy. It is what it is. But with those 4 through 7 round picks, I mean, I think they got a decent return. I mean, Kyrie
I like
Jackson, I
Kyrie
like.
Jackson a
I
lot.
think he's going to be a decent depth guy, decent cornerback 3 if they have to. The other guys, I'm neither here nor there. I didn't watch enough tape to really like or hate in
Hmm.
any of them. But I think they're all decent, solid. I mean, at least they took their kicker in the 6th and
Yeah,
not the
yeah,
4th, so you could say that. So, but yeah, a good draft class. Could be great if JJ
yeah,
really turns
yeah. I
out.
think Kevin O'Connell getting his guy here. The reports coming out today are that they did try to get up for Drake May, so maybe this was option 2 for them, but a sound option 2. We talked about how talented we think J.J. McCarthy is, and the right coach at the NFL level is really going to be able to unlock that. And I think O'Connell is one of the better quarterback whisperers in the league. So throwing to Justin Jefferson and T.J. Hawkinson and Jordan Addison and having a defense coached by Brian Flores, I think that the Vikings are going to be fun to watch, and another team in this division that's going to be feisty, just like the Detroit Lions, who preach feistiness. They, again, in the mold of what the Lions are as an organization, they drafted very aggressively. They were not afraid to go up and get Terry and Arnold, who obviously they needed cornerback help. Um, and Arnold was he your CB2 as well? He was my
Yeah.
CB2, a guy that is physical at the catch point, plays the run hard, a sound tackler, somebody that I think that the Lions are looking for at their cornerback position. And they moved up to get him from 29. Again, we talked about Quinyon and Turner even being victims of the fall of the defensive player in this draft. So they get good value even though it was a trade up in Terrion.
Yeah, I agree. I love their draft. Terrion and Ennis Rakestraw, they fit major needs that they needed last year. Come in, fill those roles really
Yeah, Rakestraw
well.
was a guy we had
Um,
mocked Rakestraw in the first to them at 29. So
yeah, yeah, that's why him dropping that far was very surprising. I heard and I saw a lot of stuff that made me think he was going to be an easy first rounder, but he ended up staying in that second. Um, and then I like
yep,
Wingo. I think Wingo's better
yep.
than Mason Smith, his teammate that went higher. So I think that's a great steal. I like Christian Mahogany. He was one of my guards, interior linemen that I really liked. I think he's going to make a good fit there. I like Giovanni Manu. I didn't know much
It's a cool
about him.
story.
I looked up a lot of it. I like that pick to them. That feels like a Lions pick. The only one I'll really criticize is Sion Vaki. The only reason I'm going to criticize it,
Yeah, they
they're putting
announced
him
him as
at
a running
running
back.
back, and that's concerning to me because I don't know
He
why.
played running back.
I get it. He could be a
Yeah,
better running back than he is safety, but they don't
that's
need
true.
running back.
Yeah,
That's my
Gibbs and Montgomery
concern.
there. Probably
Um,
hoping.
yeah, they need
I
DBs,
guess
not
they could have
running
announced him at
backs.
DB if they were just going to put him on special teams anyway. But he's probably going to be a dog on special teams.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think he'll fit in there. But overall, I like this class. It's a very good class. Fit their needs perfectly. I think they maybe missed out on adding a wide receiver two
Mm.
and an edge, but I mean, I think cornerback was their main need, and I think
The
they
the
filled that.
the flip in raw, and we're getting a little bit into the macro here, but the flip from the cornerback room last year to this year with Carlton Davis, Terrion Arnold, Ennis Rakestraw,
Yeah,
it's an impressive turnaround in just a year, and it's really what cost them in the NFC Championship against the Niners was their corners weren't able to keep up with Brandon Ayuk and Debo Samuel and Kittle when he got out into the open field. So they knew their need, they knew their hole in this roster, and they filled it immediately. So they also technically, I think they traded this year's third that they're missing for Davis. So they used their first, second, and third on corners. Um, they
yeah,
they saw a need and they filled it. So a solid draft class and another solid draft class in this division, and we'll wrap it up with the Green Bay Packers. Another draft that I really liked. Uh,
yeah.
Jordan Morgan in the first. I know you loved Jordan Morgan. Um, Coming out of Arizona, kind of a hybrid. You talked about versatility in this O-line class being as prevalent as it is. This guy's going to be able to play tackle. He's going to be able to move on the inside. The Packers under Brian Gutekunst had never taken a first-round offensive lineman, so he's the first. So obviously they think very, very highly of what Morgan may bring to them. Another Texans draft crush for you was Edgerrin Cooper, who ends up with them at 45, who
Yeah.
a rangy run stopper, hard-nosed linebacker, ending up with the Packers in the mold of we all remember like a Devondre Campbell, like somebody who can just get in a hole and hit somebody, and that's what Cooper's going to be able to offer you. And Cooper also offers you a little bit more in terms of the length and the ranginess, playing sideline to sideline on their defense. I think could be really fun. Another guy to play the box in Javon Bullard. Um, I don't know I don't know if you talked about him much coming out of Georgia. I like him. Another Georgia defensive back who, you know, people start talking about closer to the draft because he's underappreciated during the season. Who'd have thunk it? That's what happens every year. These Georgia defensive backs don't get enough love during the year. Um, but those first three are great, and then they made good selections all the way through. I saw somebody tweet. I know uh, a Packer Theo Ash on Twitter, who's a Packers fan, when Marshawn Lloyd got selected, who was I think Daniel Jeremiah's RB1, his favorite running back in the draft. But when Lloyd got selected, Theo tweeted, "Hello again, Aaron Jones. Like welcome back. Uh, he's gonna be a fun fit." Uh, curious to see your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I'll say I think the biggest flex for the Packers is that they really didn't lose anyone
Yeah,
from last year. So they have a good playoff team, and they added these guys to it. So I think obviously adding the O line helps. They definitely needed it. Edgerrin Cooper is going to be nice. He's going to be really good in that. He was. If you want to talk about Daniel Jeremiah's list, he was a first rounder in that list.
yeah,
So and not to harp. I mean, it's hard not to harp on it. It's disappointing, but he went right after our pick, and he was someone that could have fit in really well for the Texans. So it was heartbreaking to see him go, but Packers definitely chose right in taking him. I think Javon Bullard. So from what I was hearing, Javon Bullard was the number one safety on a lot
really.
of teams' lists. So to get him here was really good for them. I think obviously Newbin started the run, and then Packers saw the opportunity and went ahead and took Bullard. So I like that pick. I like the Marshawn Lloyd pick. I don't. Have you looked into the Josh Jacobs contract at all?
No, I don't think since the signing I have.
So they have an out after this
Really, so
year.
it's a 1 year deal
Um,
effectively.
so Pretty much. They gave him, I think, 3 or 4, but after this year, his contract goes up and his guarantee goes down, so that if they cut
Less
him,
dead money.
they don't have to worry about too much. Yeah, so they don't lose too much. So I like that pick, knowing that, because I like Lloyd decently, and I think he's what the Packers go for in a running back. And so to backfill Josh Jacobs with a guy that if Josh Jacobs doesn't work out, they would be satisfied with, I think they did good there. The rest of them kind of hit or miss. I like Monk, but again, just kind of another interesting interior lineman prospect. And then for them just to take in 3 safeties was a little weird. I don't know if they were just going shotgun effect on that one or what they were doing. But I mean, hey, like I said, I can't critique them too much, just because they really didn't lose anyone. So adding these guys to that already playoff team just
I love, as the sleeper in this class, I really like Keaton Oladapo from Oregon State, who is this. He played safety for them. I think he projects a little bit better as a nickel box player at the NFL level, but he's this long, tall. He's like 6'2", 6'3", like 220, 225, and will just run through your face mask. I think he fits kind of the Packer mentality. I think he's going to be able to lay the boom on people. He's a fun player. And another guy with special team versatility, who I know, and especially in this draft class, there were a lot of picks late where it's like, is he going to benefit us on special teams? And that's usually how it goes. But because of the lack of depth in this class, that's how I'm viewing most of these late round picks. Is do they give you anything on kickoff, especially with the new kickoff rules? Can they return kicks? Can they fly down the field and hit somebody? That's the way I'm looking at it. The Packers were also the team to take Michael Pratt, so Jordan Love should be concerned about his job. He'll be out in 2 years, and Pratt will be a Hall of Famer. But yeah, a solid draft class for Green Bay, and that'll round out the NFC North. I say we move south to the NFC South, and we can start with the Atlanta Falcons, who I have been excited to talk about because I think at the 108, Michael Penix Jr. is, how do I put this in the most harsh way possible? It's the worst draft pick I've ever seen. I think, in terms of everything that goes into it. There is nothing that anyone could say. There's honestly nothing that Michael Penix himself could do at the NFL level once Kirk Cousins is gone, where I would look back at the process of this and say, oh, okay, wait, I get it, because Penix was good. The process of this genuinely makes no sense. There is not one thing you could do to convince me otherwise.
Yeah, this is a hard one.
It's the worst draft pick I've ever seen. It's not even a hard one. This is rock bottom. This pick sucked.
I don't. So here's where I'm at on it. I don't like it. I hate the pick. I hate the pick for him. But here's the reason why, though. I don't hate them taking, like, if they had gotten May here.
Correct.
I don't hate that because we know May has to sit. He needs to sit. Penix is number one older, but number two, he's the most pro ready of all these quarterbacks.
There's no benefit to sitting Michael Penix Jr.
Zero benefit. And I think that's where the criticism comes in. I don't think, obviously, drafting a quarterback first round, top 10, right after you sign a quarterback to $100+ million guaranteed. I get it. That's not the greatest thing to do, but that's not the worst part of this whole pick. It's the quarterback they decided to pick to do that with that makes it the atrocity
honestly,
it is.
even more than May, they could have taken McCarthy, and I would have been able to rationalize it more than this. This is, like, pretty abysmal process. By the time that...
Yeah, I think of all the 6 quarterbacks that got drafted in the top 12, I think this is the worst one
either Knicks is 5. I mean, I don't... Either one of the two...
I agree. I think Bo Nix is probably the next worst, but I think Penix is the worst because he's pro ready.
He's ready to go.
Like, he is ready to start. Bo Nix, you could argue he could benefit from sitting.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. And they like you said, they just paid Kirk Cousins $90 million in guaranteed dollars. Yeah. They didn't tell him that this was happening until they were making the phone call to Penix. seriously indefensible. Like this.
Yeah, another layer to it that I actually just heard. I forget who was talking about it. I think it was Dana Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks. I was listening to their podcast, and they actually fleshed out what I actually really like and didn't think about. So everyone wants to relate this to like, oh well, they drafted Jordan Love behind Aaron Rodgers.
It
Sad, it
is
wasn't a
not the same.
problem. That
It's not
it's
close to the
not
same.
because Kirk Cousins hasn't done anything
No.
for the Falcons yet. Rodgers had won a Super Bowl. Rodgers had gone to the playoffs multiple times. He didn't have to worry.
Rodgers
it was an
was also
annoyance,
on the way
but
out.
it wasn't a.
There were talks about him.
Yeah.
His contract is running up. There were talks about him possibly wanting out.
Yep.
So the Packers took a guy that they were willing to sit for a year or two at 26 to sit behind him. And he was a 21-year-old quarterback coming out, some toolsy, project type guy. They want to sit him behind Rodgers, who they knew was on the way out, legend of the franchise, getting ready for the next guy. You just brought in Kirk Cousins 3 months ago, and you paid him $180 million.
He supplanted his life. He supplanted his career to come build a legacy for you guys in the next 4 years, and you return that favor with going, hey, here's someone to keep nipping at your heels. That way, the first bad throw you throw, not even the first bad game, first bad throw, we're calling for Penix. And then it's going to be the rest of your career here is, oh, we should have had Penix. Oh, we should have had Penix. And then, not to mention, when we're going through practices and games, say you tweak an ankle and you're like, ooh, that's, I'm not injured. I could still play, but maybe I don't want to today because we don't need to take the risk. No, it's, I tweaked an ankle, but if I fucking sit today, I'm getting replaced. So nope, not sitting. And then you take the risk of a worse injury.
Yeah.
It's just a bad decision all
There
throughout.
were people who were like, maybe the Falcons are concerned about Kirk's Achilles. He's old. He's coming off this Achilles injury. Why wouldn't? Maybe they're concerned about that, so they drafted a quarterback. Then why'd you give him $90 million guaranteed dollars 3 months ago if you were concerned that he was going to get hurt again? There's zero argument to any of this that could convince me that this was a good pick. And again.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think that ruins their draft class, which I actually really like their draft class outside of that pick. But
Rook Ororo, they traded up for. I like Rook as a player. Felt it was a little bit early. Felt maybe you didn't have to trade up for him. That's, compared to the Penix pick, that's fine. Braylon Trice, big physical win with his hand edge out of Washington. Kind of was projecting to keep coming up boards and then flattened out this year. Just didn't really take the big step that people were expecting. Still a fine player. Brandon Dorless on the inside. Big physical guy. The rest of their draft, I'm with you. It was fine. I did expect them to address the secondary, and they didn't at all, which was another maybe not mistake on their part, but I felt like that a corner should have been addressed at some point. But the fact that you brought in Kirk Cousins and you didn't support him with the 8th overall pick is, what's another synonym for bad that we can use here that we haven't used already?
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say on it, and you can say more, but the last thing I'll say, also, the vibe we got from them when they signed Kirk Cousins
Let's go win a Super Bowl. We're in a bad division.
Yeah.
Let's get a good team together.
And then that draft pick just says we're planning for the future.
It's like, what?
And it's just, it's confusing. I don't know.
Again, 3 years from now when Michael Penix Jr. is 26 years old and he's taking the field for the first time, and he leads them to the playoffs, and everybody's like, see, we needed him. I'm going to look him and be like, no, you didn't. You didn't. It was a bad decision then. It'll be a bad decision probably for the rest of time. But I we can move on. It was a shitty pick.
Yeah.
And we can move to the Carolina Panthers, who did this entire draft. The point was to support their new quarterback in Bryce Young. Obviously did not have nearly enough support last year. In the first round, they take Xavier Legette, who they were linked to throughout the process. Legette said something like Canales told him if he got to him at 33 that he was going to be the pick. And Canales came out a couple days later and was like, well, we told that to everybody. Like, no, you didn't. They didn't tell that to everybody. Um, so Leggett, they move up a spot 4 and take him at 32. Um, I liked Xavier Leggett. Uh, what are your thoughts on Leggett as the prospect?
Like in himself, I was meh. I wasn't one guy that had him super high on my list. I think he was wide receiver
Okay.
12. So I mean, I had him way
Yeah.
further down than most. So I just didn't see it. He just didn't impress. Not as much as the rest of the class. So I mean, if that's their guy at wide receiver, then that's their guy at wide receiver, and they got him. And hopefully, it turns out better than them trading up for
Yeah.
Jonathan Mingo.
Right. Exactly. I think Leggett. You've got Deontay Johnson. You've got Mingo. You've got Thielen. These guys who are like underneath winners, and what you're hoping Leggett gives you in the kind of AJ Brown body type in this big, strong, like 6', 6'1" player with wheels. Leggett can fly. I mean, you're hoping that he can give you some over the top
Yeah.
element to your offense. So people just can't play in the box and blitz Bryce and do all these things. So uh, then they went with the Danny Wiegans draft. The rest of the way, they went Jonathan Brooks, Trevin Wallace, Jatavion Sanders,
And Charles Smith Wade. I was very so, and that's the thing. That's where this kind of rebounds for me. Obviously, these are guys that I loved. I mean, I think Jonathan Brooks. They've been needing a running back since they traded CMC away. I think he can be their answer. I would tell people to calm expectations. He's coming off an ACL tear. We all know the first year off an ACL tear, you get 70% of the production you get the next year. That's been about average for most. That's why I'm excited for Javonte Williams this year. But yeah, so I mean, Jonathan Brooks, great running back ad. They've needed it. Jatavion Sanders, good athletic tight end. They really haven't had one since Greg Olson, so hopefully he can step in for him there. And then Charles Smith Wade, a guy who came on at the Senior Bowl. He's got great ball skills. He's a ball hawk. He's not the best at the coverage side of things, but man, if the ball is anywhere in his vicinity, he's coming down with it, it feels like. So I think he could be a real interesting depth guy. Or even guy that you throw out there that you put a better safety that can help with the coverage type stuff, and you just let him
Right.
ball hawk. Trevin Wallace is a good linebacker out of Kentucky. He fell to the third, and I don't know that you can call it a fall. I think
It's
being picked
about
in the third
right.
is right
Yeah.
around where he should have been. Yeah, it feels about right for what he's got going on. Especially after promoting the linebacker to your GM, I'm not surprised that they took the linebacker in the third round. So he's going to be a good weak side linebacker. I like that. So I was very happy with this draft. I don't think it's anything exceptional, but I don't think it's bad. I think it's a good to better than good draft. Only thing confusing for me really is that Xavier Leggett pick. I just, for me, I would have much rather given him Roman Wilson.
Really?
I think he was, yeah, I don't know. Listen, maybe
Sure.
he'll prove me wrong. There's a reason they traded up for him, but there's a couple wide receivers obviously in the same tier I had Leggett, and
Well,
I
we
think
could-
they would have
We
probably
could go.
fit
We could
better.
just go down the list. Would you have taken Keon?
Oof,
Would you have taken
No.
McConkey?
yes.
Would you have taken? I guess next was who? A.D. Mitchell.
So for me that tier, I mean, so like Corley, I wouldn't have taken Keon. I wouldn't have. I would have taken Roman. Pearsall
Yep.
wasn't available. I would have taken the two guys you had said, and I think I would have taken Jalen Polk.
Yeah,
over
Polk went
Leggett.
right after 230. Yeah, like 30, yeah.
So I think those are. I think that's kind of that tier he was in, and I think those are the guys I would have taken, and I wouldn't have taken, and I think that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's the worst pick in the world. I have my preferences. They obviously have theirs, and honestly, the biggest comparison I've heard is an AJ Brown type for Xavier Leggett. So if he can live up to that, they made
Absolutely.
the right
I
pick
do.
for sure.
I mean, the entire offseason for Carolina has been like moves where you're like, okay, like you pay Robert Hunt big money, huge money. You pay Damian Lewis big money, 2 guards to come in for you on the offensive line, and then you take Leggett, who, I agree with you, maybe isn't the best option available there, but gives your offense something new, a new element to the offense. They're trying to see what they got in Bryce Young, and they're doing what they can with these moves that from the outside don't look great in terms of what the norm of building a roster is maybe, but they are doing what they can to surround Bryce Young, and you can't blame them for that. They're trying.
Yeah, I think they did great. I mean, you get a wide receiver that you believe is a first round talent, a tight end that's going to be an athletic freak, and then a running back who could be RB1 of this class. I think
Yep.
they've done great to support Bryce Young in this draft for sure. I think my biggest pet peeve, obviously, but I think they can stop using that
I
excuse
agree.
after this year if Bryce
I
Young
think the
doesn't pan out.
team is built up enough to where it doesn't have to be Bryce Young elevating the team anymore, like all the time. Um,
Yeah,
Bryce Young he's got a structure around him, and Canales, who saved Geno Smith's career, he saved Baker's career. Um, who's there now with Young, who his career doesn't need saving, but he is obviously a solid quarterback coach. So
I I wish all the best for Bryce Young, but a part of me wants him not to succeed just so all of this, oh well, the Texans roster was so much better. Bull crap. Before the draft, we all agreed Texans roster was
yep,
booty cheeks compared to the Panthers roster, and CJ Stroud
yep.
still made it happen. If you're an elite quarterback, you're going to make it happen regardless. Good quarterbacks still need help. I get that, but that's annoying. That's the worst narrative I've ever heard. But I like Bryce Young. I do think he's going to do well, but I do think that CJ Stroud was the better quarterback, and people
Yeah,
should deal
I
with
had
that.
I had Young as QB3 behind AR and Stroud as well. So I mean,
And
yeah,
I would agree with that. I think AR is a better
yeah.
quarterback
So
too.
that's where they fall. But I am rooting for him because that team was so atrociously bad last year, and they missed.
Hey, they still
That's
beat
true.
us
They
though, so I
did.
can't
They
really say
did.
too much, I guess.
That was a road game. Those are always tough in the NFL. The Saints.
Yeah, but
The
good
Saints
lord.
also in this division. Um, I like this. I talked about the Giants doing more with less. The Saints, I feel like, fall in that same category with 7 picks. Talisa Fuanga in the first round of Oregon State. Obviously, you needed offensive tackle help. Ryan Ramczyk is literally on his last leg. Um, that was a bad joke, but he's got injury issues. He's got to be out soon. Fuanga seems to be the replacement. Can also move around. You talk about versatility. You could play guard for him if they needed to, but I think he is going to stay on the outside. Kool-Aid, a guy who fell, a guy who he does feel like a Saint, doesn't he? I could totally see McKinstry on the back of a Saints jersey, and it just makes sense.
I could totally see Kool-Aid on the back of his
Yeah,
jersey, to be honest,
yeah,
in the
that'd be sweet.
Saints.
Be like the He Hate Me from the Arena League. Yeah.
Yes.
Not not another pick until the 5th, and they had 7. I say do less with more because they picked the first and second round, not again until the 5th round. And they take a guy in Spencer Rattler at 150, who people I think thought would go higher. A lot of people's QB7 in this class. I'm rooting for Spencer Rattler. I think the tape was good.
Same.
Uh, I think the antics and shit that he had in high school, people grow up. And I think that everything I've seen and heard, and I've not been around Spencer Rattler, obviously, it seems like having to transfer to South Carolina, having to stay in college for a little bit longer than expected, now getting drafted in the 5th round, he's been humbled a lot. Um, Run out of Oklahoma by Caleb Williams. He's been humbled a lot. And I think that the tape tells you that he might be breathing down the neck of Derek Carr as early as this year.
Yeah. I mean, you know how I feel about Derek
Yeah.
Carr. Can't stand him. So I love this pick, and I like this draft in general. I agree with you. It's a very good, doing a lot with very little. I think this is less than the other draft that we were talking about because it may be one more pick,
Coming from the
but at the
5th.
same time,
Yeah.
it's 3/5 and a sixth. I mean, that is hard. But I love Fuanga at 14. I think he's a better lineman than Latham. So I mean, the fact that they got him at 14 when Latham went at 7, I think that's great for them. That was a kill pick. I think Kool-Aid falling to 41 is a kill pick. I was wishing my team would have taken him. And then yeah, like you said, Spencer Rattler. I think there's been. It's fun to watch because he was the projected 101 when he entered college. Always gonna be 101 of that class when he goes out. Then he stumbled, and now people are like, "Oh, he's garbage. He's going to go undrafted." And then we get to the draft, and he goes 5th round, right in the middle. And And I think that's a great spot for him. I think this is going to be a good spot because as much as I hate Derek Carr, there's going to be things he can learn
Sure.
from Derek Carr sitting behind him for a year. And then, yeah, I think next year even he
I
could
think he
make a
could.
push for it if they're not picking top of the class anyway. But it'll be interesting. And then obviously Jalen Ford, who is a baller, has the interception record for the Texas Longhorns at linebacker position, and just has some good speed and range. I'm excited for him. So I think this is a good class overall.
I really
Very
like
good class.
Christian Boyd a lot as well out of Northern Iowa. Kind of the it's gonna sound ridiculous. He's like super diet Byron Murphy, coming from a small school, an undersized defensive tackle who plays the leverage game really well.
Yeah.
As this kind of like big lower half guy who's explosive. He's a fun player. I really liked him throughout this entire process. And I'm with you. I think the Saints did a good job. And we can move on to the final NFC South team, the Tampa Bay Bucks, who this is like the definition of a fine draft class. There's nothing to hate here. There's nothing necessarily maybe to love here. Graham Barton is a really good player in the first. You're supposed to get a really good player in the first. This swing offensive lineman can really play anywhere for you. Their O-line is either aging or I know a couple retirements along that O-line. So Barton fills a definite hole in front of Baker Mayfield. And then they kind of took swings the rest of the way on Chris Braswell, who's the next tier of edge rusher in this class, but has some tools to like in the second. Jalen McMillan in the top 100, a player that I know we both liked. Jalen Polt got hurt. McMillan stepped up, played really well for Washington. Kind of gives you a little bit of everything. An underrated jump ball receiver. Made some pretty ridiculous catches over top. Tyke Smith had a great Senior Bowl. Bucky Irving is this kind of change of pace receiving back. Did a lot of it at Oregon, receiving the football. So, is there another word to describe this class for you other than fine? This is mid.
Mid?
Like it's a good class.
Mid
yeah,
might be the one.
Know.
Yeah, I like the Barton pick, obviously. I think at 26, that's about where we had him, so not a great win or loss. Braswell, same thing. 25th in the second round. I don't know that's a big win or loss. Tyke Smith, I think the safety run happened. They got a little
jumpy,
safety happy and took him. I think it's not a bad pick, but it's not. I could literally go through. The only one I have anything to say is Bucky Irving. And I think it's a bad pick because I just don't like Bucky Irving. But in the end, I think mid is the most accurate
class.
Yeah, it's gonna get you there maybe, but it's not gonna give you any step up or anything like that. I mean, I don't understand taking Jalen McMillan, other than I guess if you just have him at that big of a value. I think you've got. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, who you just signed to a contract, Trey Palmer, who you just said you're putting in a whole set of plays specifically for him because you're impressed, and then you go out and draft a Jalen McMillan in the third round. I don't know. That was a little confusing, but hey, you can never have enough firepower, I guess.
I'm with you. I wasn't a huge fan of Bucky's tape, but as a receiver, he can be fun. I don't know. I mean, they already have Rashad White there, who's the lead back, so.
Yeah,
it was a fine draft, and they wrap up a fine NFC South division. That's maybe indicative of the entire division.
That's fair.
And so finally, we can wrap up this NFC episode with the NFC West, and we mentioned diet Byron Murphy maybe being Christian Boyd. Well, the Seattle Seahawks got the real Byron Murphy at number 16, who I know you absolutely adored through this draft process, not only because he was a Texas, but because he is just a really good player.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for his career. I'm excited for him to be able to line up on that Seattle
the fit
D-line.
with Mike McDonald is about as good as you could ask for.
It really, I think this is, for his career, is very good. I think he won this. Obviously, you wish your team drafts best player, but then no team can draft all of them. Byron Murphy's just going to be a monster in the middle. I liked Christian Haynes a lot, so to get him in the third round, I think that's Yeah, I think that's a great steal for them with that offensive line trouble. Nehemiah Pritchett has some good tape. He was an interesting picture, and then DJ James. So I don't know how much you did on him. I did a good amount. I didn't think he was sixth round. I
Oh
thought
yeah,
he was
I did
better
too.
than sixth round. I mean, I was surprised when they picked him in the
I
sixth round. I
thought
thought he had already gone. So
I
I
thought
was,
James was better than Pritchett, tape was.
yeah, I agree. I was floored when DJ James went in the sixth round. So to get him there, I think that's pretty good. So they have good track record with drafting
Yes, they
rookie
do.
cornerbacks late. So you got to be happy with them. I think this is a good draft. I think they added some serious needs. Their defensive tackle, their offensive line, their cornerback. I think they fit their needs. And I think they set themselves up for a good year next year if Geno Smith can
Absolutely.
keep his job.
Yeah, I have a buddy who's a Seahawks fan who was telling me through the draft process that he didn't think the Seahawks needed defensive line, which is a fine take. He was looking mainly for a first round offensive lineman, but the run went. They had a chance at Faatanu, which I thought was a perfect pick that they didn't make. But I was telling him, and I had mocked a couple defensive linemen to Seattle, and Mike McDonald thrived last year with Justin Matabike, and this year he got his
Yep.
Justin Matabike and Byron Murphy, who's going to be able to rush the passer and disrupt everything in the middle. And they've got a really deep front defensive line unit. That's going to be fun. Christian Haynes, like you said, solid player. AJ Barner, IU legend, transferred to Michigan. I don't love him much as a player. He'll be like a run blocking type tight end, kind of a Will Dissly replacement maybe, who left and went to
Yeah.
the Chargers. I didn't watch much Tyrese Knight. Can't offer you much on him coming out of UTEP. They needed linebacker help. They lost Jordan Brooks. Bobby Wagner is gone again, so kind of, again, like you said, fit their needs. I do like the dynamic of keeping Pritchett and James as teammates. That's kind of funny when you take CB1 and CB2
Yeah.
from an SEC school together. And a quick shout out to Michael Jarrell, the offensive tackle from Findlay, because I thought Findlay was that was going to be like a European thing. I didn't know Findlay was a real college, so I'd never heard of it before. D2 school in Ohio, so shout out Michael Jarrell.
I will say getting Christian Haynes in the third makes
Yeah.
it more palatable that you went Byron Jones in the
Yeah,
first.
I agree. I think that's a perfectly fine take. I would rather. I would. The way to put that is I would rather have Byron Murphy and Christian Haynes than a first round guard and whoever the interior defensive line was in the third. So
Exactly.
I like it.
Yeah.
Overall, solid drafts for Seattle, I think, and we can move on to some more NFC West drafts. Let's go with the San Francisco 49ers, who I feel like shocked people a little bit with the Ricky Pearsall selection. I personally loved it. I love the Slick Rick pick. I really like Ricky Pearsall. One of my kind of all-stars from starting as early as last year when I was watching Anthony Richardson tape and going, this white guy is the only guy that gets open on this fucking Florida offense. This is the only dude who he throws to. A really sound route runner, a guy who makes some circus catches, had the best catch in all of college football last year with the kind of fadeaway one-hand backhand catch. What did you think Ricky was going to – I definitely didn't think he was going to get into the first, but it was fun that he did.
So I'll say this: I wasn't surprised with him picking a wide receiver. I was a little surprised by it being Ricky Pearsall. I didn't hate it. I liked it a lot. I think he's going to be exactly what they want. The surprise for me came when they still haven't traded Brandon
Yeah,
Ayuk or Debo.
I thought Ricky certainly meant the end for Debo.
I'm a little confused in why they're hesitating at this point. I don't know if maybe they're just waiting for a better offer or something, but why go wide receiver in the first round like this and someone like a Ricky Pearsall if you're not gonna trade Ayuk or Debo, specifically Debo.
Yeah. Ricky also teammates with Brandon Ayuk at Arizona State, so that's another fun wrinkle to the whole thing. Maybe Ayuk was in the ears of John Lynch and Shanahan.
How crazy would it be if they traded away
that would
Ayuk
suck.
and kept Pearsall?
Yeah, unfortunate. I thought for Ayuk you would have had to have gotten a mid first rounder this year. I thought Jacksonville could have given it. They didn't, obviously. So I think once the first round was over, I didn't necessarily expect Ayuk to get dealt, but I definitely thought a third or a fourth maybe for Debo was in play, and that didn't happen. Uh, but they get to the second, they take another one of my favorites in Renardo Green from Florida
Oh yeah.
State, who his best tape, and people have talked about it at length, his best tape was against Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas in the LSU offense. He was locked down in that game.
Yeah, I was surprised. I trying to think. I'm not surprised he went this high,
Yeah,
but I am in a sense because I had heard nothing about him. It was really just like you and me talking about him, and we both had been impressed, but I hadn't heard anything about him. So I was like, oh, this guy, 3, 4, 5, somewhere in there. Like, he's going to go low, but he's going to perform really well. When he went in the second, I was like, okay, I feel
yeah,
better about
right.
what I saw. I feel like we both saw it, and we both are like, okay, it's been accurately, like, yeah, we were right. The dude had very good tape against them,
Good
but
tape
had
everywhere.
good
Yeah,
tape against everyone. Yeah, I mean, so I like that. I like Renardo Green there. I think Dominic Pooney is a good pick in the third. My favorite picks for them were almost back to back. The Isaac Horrendo and
yep.
Jacob Cowing. Those two, I love those two picks in the
Brendo is
fourth.
so sick coming
Um,
from Louisville. He's so
yeah,
fast.
I think he's going to be crazy to learn from CMC. And if he can kind of tap into a little of what CMC has got going, I think he could be really dangerous. I was interested the entire draft where he
Yep.
was going to go. Because he got a starting job. I mean, that would have been fun. I knew he probably wasn't going to, but if he did, I was going to be extremely interested. And then he went to the 49ers, and my first reaction was like, oh, that sucks. He'll never see the field. But then I started thinking about it, and I don't know about that. Like, he may not see the field this year, maybe not next year, but I think learning from CMC, it'll be worth it for him. So that's a very good pick. And then I like Jacob Cowing a lot. He's a quick guy, great burst, great cuts. I think he'll do them pretty well. But well, yet again, just kind of the same thing. Is Debo or Ayuk gone, or are we trying to keep them, or what's going on here? Is my only question for that
Yeah,
wide receiver room.
I'm not entirely sure. I thought I did think I saw Debo was getting more aggressively shopped. They would rather keep Ayuk, which is probably that's smart. But obviously,
Oh,
neither of
for
them
sure.
gone. I don't know that either of them really gets dealt now with the draft being over. They were most valuable to the Niners during the draft, and now the draft is immediately over. So now they're probably like the bottom of value to the Niners in terms of what they can get back. So um, probably feel like they'd rather just keep them and roll it back again this year, but interested to see where they go. Um, and the Rams, Los Angeles Rams, another team in this division. Uh, I felt like I don't know how I feel about this draft class. Jared Verse at the 119 is fine. A solid edge rusher, heavy hands. We knew they needed help on the defensive line. I had continuously mocked Leatu Latu here. Um, edge did feel like that was going to happen. They end up with the third one off the board. They went on a run. All three of the top edge rushers went in 5 picks, which was kind of cool. Um, but then they get his teammate Braden Fisk, who you were not exceptionally high on, a little higher on him than I was, and they traded the mother load to get him, which I think was my main
Yeah, that
issue
was
with
crazy to me.
it.
Yeah. Um,
Corum in the third, sure. I didn't, I didn't love Corum. They don't, other than, um, and I'm completely blanking on Kieran Williams' name. Uh, he said they play similarly, him and Kieran. So
yeah.
maybe that's why they took him. I don't love a third round selection on Blake Corum. I didn't like Cam Kinchen's tape out of Miami, but I'm not going to combat anything that front office does because if anything, that front office has proven that they can draft really really well.
Yeah, I think this draft for me is epitomized by high risk, high reward. Jared Verse, you gotta hope that he can
Yeah.
loosen up the hips and play better that way. Braden Fisk, you gotta hope that length isn't a problem for him. Blake Corum, you gotta hope that those injuries aren't too much of a holdback on him. Cameron Kitchens, you gotta hope that he brings his 2022 self, not his 2023 self. I think it's a lot of high risk, high reward picks, and hoping that each one pans out. Because if each one pans out, I think we're talking this is the best
Yeah,
draft class
absolutely.
in this draft, because they all could be really, really good, but they have those glaring things, which is why they didn't go higher. I want to do a shout out to them. They know how to draft wide receivers because I drafted my boy Jordan Whittington. Dude's gonna be good for them. I'm excited to see him in a Sean McVay offense. And again, I just want to point out, place kicker went in the 6th round, not the 4th. But aside from that, I think it's a good. I think it's a good. It's a very good risky draft class.
Yeah, and they're, I mean, again, they're a team that turned Kobe Turner into a star last year. They're a team that turned Byron Young into a star last year. Now they get an undersized, twitchy defensive tackle that is not nearly as good as Aaron Donald, but they're good track record of twitchy, undersized defensive tackles with Verse coming off the edge. I mean, this team, I felt like they could have used more help at corner than they ended up with. But I mean, again, I can't necessarily go against a Sean McVay-led team who is maybe the best in the league at maximizing what players are really, really good at. Bo Limmer, obviously, also getting to the 6th was a little bit surprising. I thought he might go higher, but a lot of Texas fans I know hated Jordan Whittington because they were like,
I
why are
loved
we
him.
getting this guy the ball when we have A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy and uh, Jatavion?
But that's the thing, is he was always in the clutch moments. He was
Yeah,
ready. He would only get 2-3 catches, but you knew when they were coming, and he
yep.
always delivered. Obviously not the upside for like guys like A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy, but I mean he's a solid receiver.
And you got him in the
That
6th, so I
I
mean
think,
you're not expecting much upside
yeah,
anyway.
I if he's gonna succeed anywhere, he's gonna succeed in a place that drafted
Yeah,
Puka Nakua and Cooper Cup. I think he's gonna do well there. They're gonna find him his spot, and he'll
absolutely.
thrive.
So yeah, I mean I think that another draft class that all going to be able, we're going to be able to look back on it and tell you if that one was good or not. Right now, it's a tough evaluation
Yeah.
with the players that they got, but one that's not necessarily a tough evaluation right away is the Arizona Cardinals. Um, the final team that we'll talk about in this episode, the last team in the NFC West. This one on paper may be my favorite in the league. Marvin Harrison in the first. Darius Robinson, who's a fun player. At the end of the first, I didn't know if he would end up in the first round, but I get it. Big physical dude who can kind of give you some versatility on the defensive line for a roster that isn't exceptionally good anywhere. So it's like we can kind of we can mitigate our issues by putting Darius Robinson wherever. And if our interior's weaker than our edges, then we'll put him on the interior. If the edges are weaker, vice versa, we'll play him on the edge. That's kind of the rationale for Darius Robinson in my mind, and I get it. Max Melton, one of our favorite tier 2 kind of corners, gets to them at 43. Trey Benson, one of the top running backs in this class, gets to them at 66. It's just like they just made the right picks everywhere.
Yeah, I think this one falls just short of favorite for me. Obviously you have to love Marvin Harrison Jr. pick. I think along the same lines of the Caleb Williams, though, it's kind of a no brainer for what they needed. So I like that pick. I don't love the Darius
Really?
Robinson pick. I
Yeah.
like Darius Robinson. I didn't have what would be considered a
No,
first round
I
grade on
didn't either
him for me.
necessarily.
Um, yeah, I thought that was a little bit of a reach for me. I love Max Melton. I love their pick of Trey Benson. Seeing as James Conner's coming up on that age cliff, getting someone who can take that mantle from him, be a three down back. That's a good pick for them. Obviously, I like the Illinois guys, Adams and Ryman. I mean, they're third round guys. They're still good. And then they snuck in Christian Jones at
Yeah.
the later end, who's a decent. He's a running O lineman, not really great in pass coverage. But I mean, I think they had a very good draft class. Just honestly, that Darius Robinson pick, that really just that keeps it from being
That's
my
fair. I
favorite.
mean, I can. The thing with the Robinson pick is I can rationalize it. Like I can see the
Yeah,
vision that they have in terms of just getting him in the room again. The most plug him in kind of wherever and where do you need him the most and just put him there. That's kind of the thought process for me with Robinson. And then like you said, Tip Raymond, certainly more of a blocking tight end, but you already have the receiving threat in Trey McBride there. Um,
yep.
I really liked my favorite pick late for them. And damn, I mean, they ended up with Xavier Thomas too out of Clemson, who's this athletic freak who you can
Yep.
hope to develop. But I really really like Dajeron Taylor Demerson, um, the long kind of coverage corner from Texas or safety from Texas Tech. I think he's a really really fun player. They ended up with him at 104. Um, just when you have a lot of swings, again, we talked about it with the Commanders having so many picks in the top 100. The Cardinals had more picks in the top 100 and uh, 8 if you count in the top 104. So hard to mess that up. A lot of swings on some talented players. It feels like they're rebuilding in the right way. Just a lot of swings on good players.
Yeah.
So
Fair.
that wraps it up. That wraps up the Cardinals. I'm one last thought on them. I'm really excited to see Marvin with Kyler. Kyler finally has a wide receiver one. I
So
mean, he had D Hop, but like for a limited amount of time.
well, that's the nice thing is he's
Yeah.
gotten rentals.
Now
Is the
he's got a
best way to
guy.
put it. He got D Hop for a couple years. He got Marquise Brown for a couple years, and then now he finally has his career guy. That Kyler gets so much hate, and I don't. He's a top 10 quarterback.
Yeah,
I feel
I
like
think he's right there.
obviously I don't. He gets a lot of hate, so to pair him with someone like Marvin Harrison, who's just going to be insane, I think it's going to be a fun offense to watch him, McBride, and Harrison go to work, and then to see if Trey Benson can beat out James Conner. It'll be a fun
And
offense.
that wraps up the NFC. It felt like in this entire conference, and maybe that's true of every draft class. I didn't. There were a lot of drafts that we liked more than disliked. I mean, it all comes down obviously to like team need and team fit, but obviously the Falcons we didn't like. The Bucks we called mid and fine. But like other than that, it was like there were a lot of good players at the top of this draft, and you can't really go wrong if you got some of these guys in the top 50 and 60. A lot of players that we liked down the board, so it'll be fun to continue that thought process and see if it applies to the AFC. Um,
Oh yeah, I was even thinking like, okay, it's time to delete my 2024 big board, but then I'm like, actually, no, I'm saving that and then reopening it in nine
yeah,
months to
go
see how
back
I
and look.
did. So it'll be a fun time to look through and see these guys, see if they fulfill what we wanted them to.
Absolutely. So yeah, that wraps up the NFC. The AFC coming probably this week. So excited for that one.
For sure.
If you have no further thoughts on the draft in general, the NFC draft, I'm good to get out of here. All
Sounds
right.
good. I'll see you next week.